The market's always moving, right? But what we're talking about right now, it's something different. It's a deeper, more fundamental shift, a change that's literally rewriting the rules of the game. So let's talk about 2025. I think it's going to be remembered as a year of, well, total contradiction. Analysts were calling it the data fog, and for good reason. It felt like every single economic signal was pulling in the opposite direction. It was just a really confusing picture for pretty much everyone. Okay, so on one hand, you had the financial markets just completely on fire. I mean, the S&P 500 was shattering records, just relentlessly pushing to new all-time highs. If you just looked at the paper, the economy looked absolutely invincible. But, and this is a big but, at the exact same time, look at this. Consumer sentiment. We're talking about how regular people felt about their own money was in an absolute freefall. I mean, hitting lows we hadn't seen in years. It was the perfect story of two different economies, right? Wall Street was popping champagne and Main Street was just bracing for impact. So what's the takeaway here? It's this huge divergence. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some statistical blip. It makes sense when you think about it. Markets are usually driven by things like corporate profits, what wealthy investors are doing. But household sentiment? That's about the real-world cost of groceries, gas, and whether you feel secure in your job. And that disconnect? Oh, it was felt most sharply in the riskier, more speculative parts of the market. Let's take NFTs, for example. Just a couple years back, they were the poster child for speculative hype, right? Well, in 2025, that hype, it just completely vanished. And that led to a brutal, painful contraction. And if you want a number, how about this? NFT prices collapsed by a staggering 69%. Poof. The air just went out of that balloon, and it happened fast. You could really feel it was the end of an era, one that was just driven by pure hype. But, and this is key, from the ashes of all that speculation, something way more real was about to be built. So, as that data fog finally started to clear up, a really powerful news story started to take shape. And it was all driven by a massive policy shift that was basically designed to reboot the entire market. We're not talking about just one little change here either. Think of it like a three-tailwind engine, ready to power the next big cycle.
So what was in this engine? Well, it had three core parts. First up, you had fiscal stimulus coming from the government. Second, monetary easing from the central bank. And third, and this is the really crucial one for our story, deregulation. This is what finally paved the way for clear, supportive rules in this brand new industry.
For years and years, the whole digital asset space was kind of operating in this murky, regulatory gray zone. And that uncertainty, it was like a massive brake pedal on institutional adoption and real innovation. Well, 2025 was the year that all came to an end.
And the game changer? It was something called the Genius Act. And yeah, its full name is a bit of a mouthful. The Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act, but it basically did exactly what it promised to do. It provided clarity.
Go ahead and mark this date down on your calendar, July 18th, 2025. This was the day the first real comprehensive federal framework for stablecoins actually became law in the U.S. By setting clear rules of the road, the industry finally had a solid foundation to build on. And the results of having that clarity, wow, they were immediate and they were explosive. Decentralized finance, or DeFi, basically grew up overnight. It went from being this little niche experiment into a real bona fide financial powerhouse, creating this whole new class of what people are now calling blue chip protocols. So just how much of a powerhouse are we talking about? Get this, in 2025 alone, DeFi protocols generated a stunning $16.2 billion in revenue. And let me be clear, this wasn't some speculative paper gain. This was real, actual, sustainable cash flow. Now, this next part is what's really mind-blowing. That $16.2 billion, it's not just a big number floating in space. That number actually puts the entire DeFi ecosystem ahead of legacy financial giants like State Street and S&P Global. Think about that for a second. A decentralized network of protocols was now out-earning institutions that have been around for a century. And it wasn't just the revenue that was growing. It was the raw usage. The annual transaction volume on stablecoin networks absolutely exploded to $45 trillion. To put that in perspective, that completely dwarfs the entire Visa payment network. This wasn't just growth anymore. This was a fundamental replumbing of how value moves around the globe. So all of this really brings us to the new face of crypto. With regulatory clarity as the foundation and all that profitability as proof in the pudding, the industry's focus has shifted in a huge way. It's pivoted away from speculation and toward real-world, tangible utility. And how is all this even possible? Well, it's because the core technology has finally grown up. You can think of infrastructure like Ethereum's layer 2s. They're basically like express lanes built on top of the main blockchain. They've proven they can be economically sustainable, and now they're ready to handle massive mainstream demand. And they can do it without the crazy high fees or the congestion that we used to see in the past. And this, right here, is where the future gets really, really exciting. We're seeing brand new industries popping up on this foundation. You've got financialized social, where your online content can actually generate real value in real time. Then you've got decentralized AI, which is creating these open and transparent AI models that are owned by us, the users, not some giant corporation. And finally, the machine economy. Picture your self-driving car autonomously paying for its own charging or tolls. I mean, each one of those is a massive shift on its own. But you know what the most important part of all this is? It's finally getting simple. There's a whole new generation of apps coming out that are just stripping away all the complexity. They're creating these seamless experiences that solve real problems for people who don't need to know a single thing about how the blockchain works under the hood. So let's go back to that question. What happens when all the hype fades away and true utility finally begins? Well, we've just seen it. The market recalibrates itself. The tourists go home, and the builders who stick around, they create a stronger, more resilient, and just infinitely more valuable foundation for the future. You know, the next big shift is always closer than you think. If you want to make sure you're ready for it, go ahead and subscribe for more powerful insights just like this. Thanks so much for watching.